Guilty in 3 gun charges, 3 federal felonies, and now the president's son is facing up to 25 years in prison. Today, we're going to have a special guest to explain to us what could happen to Hunter when his sentencing date comes. Is he going to face time behind bars? Is he going to get probation? We're going to compare with this expert, with this criminal attorney, not only his case to former President Trump's case, but also how has the role of the president played out in this, both one, a federal case, and the other one, a state case. And joining me now, criminal attorney, Counselor Raymond Colón. Counselor, what does this mean for Hunter Biden or even the president of the United States, Joe Biden? Now his son is a convicted felon, 3 charges, and was found guilty on all of them.
Well, I think it absolutely proves the point that the Department of Justice is not unjust. No, it's the Department of Justice that carries the law as it's supposed to be applied. I mean, two juries have spoken. They were unanimous, and they actually came to verdicts pretty quickly. I think it shows that any sort of propaganda or opinions that the Department of Justice is unfair, that Donald Trump has been, let's say, treated differently, I think that goes out, flies right out the window. This is the president's son who's been accused and now found guilty by a jury of his peers. You have Bob Melendez, a senator in New Jersey. That's a Democratic senator, member of the party of the president, Democratic senator, and he's on trial in the Southern District. And you have a congressman in Texas that's currently being tried for receiving bribes. So I think that the justice system worked, the jury system worked, and I think both men were found guilty because the proof was really well beyond reasonable doubt.
And in this case, the proofs were overwhelmingly, I would say, going towards a conviction. In this case, he's now convicted. Do you expect the maximum penalty for these crimes that could go up to 25 years behind bars? What do you expect to be done by the judge or to be considered in Hunter Biden's case that had no previous felonies in the past?
Well, these types of cases involving false statements on applications to purchase a gun, they're very rarely accused or even presented to a grand jury. Usually, if there is an accusation, it's just by an information where they may plead guilty, generally to some sort of misdemeanor involving this type of behavior. This is uncommon. I believe that he'll get a probation sentence. I do not believe that Hunter Biden will receive any sort of detention or incarceration. I just think at this point, many of the jurors, actually, when they were polled after the verdict, said they thought this was a waste of time and a waste of the government's money. So that's, I think, indicative. The judge won't take that into consideration, but it shows you how rare this is. In Donald Trump's case, initially I predicted that there would be possibly a hung jury. I never thought he'd be exonerated by a not guilty verdict. But in terms of the possible sentence that Hunter Biden faces, he can face up to 25 years. That's just so out of the realm of reality in these cases. But Donald Trump is facing up to 4 years in prison. He could get probation as well. The problem with Donald Trump was that he behaved so disrespectfully with respect to Judge Marchand. He implicated his daughter. He mentioned, witnesses like Michael Cohen and other individuals. He attacked their credibility. He said that, this was a sham. This was a witch hunt. These are all things that are going to make a judge uncomfortable. And remember, when each of these individuals go on to their the pre-sentence investigation report, Donald Trump, of course, has had his. The issue for him is he going to be remorseful, right? That he feels that he did something wrong. He wants to apologize. I don't see that happening. And if he continues with that sort of, let's say, behavior during the course of an investigation and an interview, I think the judge is going to take that into consideration, as well as the fact that he actually committed violations of the law, right? Contempt, actually that he was warned on various occasions, and even promoted when Bob Costello, one of the only 2 witnesses that the defense put on, that Bob Costello was so disrespectful to the judge as well. Speaking while the judge was speaking, saying things on the record he didn't. So Donald Trump has an unfortunate influence on people where they start behaving in a way that he can't articulate it because he can get into trouble, but they'll do it for him. Members of the Congress showing up and saying exactly what Donald Trump would have said. Remember, just when they were at a recess or at the end of the day, the congressman that showed up, that they just parroted what he had said because he couldn't say it. So he was like the ventriloquist in a way, right? That was or puppeteer. In the case of Mr. Hunter Biden, he's remained calm. He did not speak to the press. He did not denounce the system. He has accepted, at this point, from what we can see, the jury's verdict. Both individuals were going to be released during the course of their, the sentencing that's going to take place in a couple of months. But I think that Donald Trump is going to be treated harshly, more harshly than the judge anticipated, because of his behavior and the fact that he denounced the whole jury system, the witnesses, the judge. And I don't think you're going to see that from Hunter Biden. I think that he's accepted what has happened. He's been quiet. He's been respectful of the judge, even though this was the same judge that actually questioned the agreement that was in hand
Yes.
2 years ago. So she's the one that said, wait a minute, I don't like this agreement. There's just too much here that he's getting, benefit of. And that was pulled from him. And yet Hunter Biden did not either criticize the judge or the Justice Department. So these two individuals are going to be handled differently, mostly because of the behavior of Donald Trump.
And it's good that you mention all that, because when we talk about political interference, these are two opposite cases, literally. We saw, and you mentioned the Congress and senators and Republican GOP elected officials going to Donald Trump's, supporting former President Trump. And in this case, we saw also the First Lady of the United States supporting her son, and she was attacked by it. So why the two different point of views? You can support your person, but the First Lady cannot go and support her stepson, which is her son, for decades. It's a double standard.
Well, yes, talking about double standards here, this is the way that, either, let's say, either MAGA Republicans or followers of that, let's say, political philosophy, they've been so inconsistent in what they've declared, because the truth is actually that there's been no interference at all by Biden or the First Lady. There's been no interference by surrogates of the president or of Hunter Biden. This is a case where it's a case study in reinventing history, reinventing the facts, and creating let's say a story, a narrative that doesn't fit what's actually happened. I mean, both Bidens, both the president and Hunter, and even the First Lady, his stepmother, have behaved in an absolute appropriate manner. And there's been no influence on the Justice Department. There's no saying who's going to win the presidency in November. But if he wanted to, Joe Biden could have erased this from the beginning, and he didn't. And that shows the type of character that he has. I think Donald Trump is just afraid of the justice system because he's committed crimes or acts that weren't prosecuted or punished before, and now he has to pay for his behavior. He's the only president, Republican or Democrat, that's behaved in this manner, either trying to suborn influence over the president of the Ukraine, taking documents that were classified that he had no right to take under federal law. No wonder what.
And the problem there was also trying to keep them, because we saw Mike Pence. He took some documents that he gave back. Former Vice President and now President of the United States, Joe Biden, had documents and gave them back. But in this case, he did allegedly as much as he could to continue to possess those documents.
Well, he disobeyed subpoenas, right? Subpoenas that were signed off on by the Attorney General. He tried to interfere with the process of allowing the FBI to go in there and search by always, putting some sort of a blockage to it, by telling his lawyers and other individuals that work for him to lie about how much had been actually produced to the government. He kept the boxes of classified information, allowed individuals that did not have clearance to move those boxes around. I mean, one wonders, what was he going to do with that information? Was he going to sell it to foreign agents or to, let's say, enemy countries like Russia, Iran, North Korea? There was no need for him to have those documents, and he tried to frustrate the process as much as he could. Now, that's why he's being, he was indicted and is in Florida facing a very friendly Donald Trump leaning judge. But you brought up an interesting point that both Vice President Pence and Vice President, and at the time Vice President Biden, both possessed documents that they were basically unaware of where they were, that they were taken out of their respective offices. And if they wanted to be unjust and unfair, they could have easily, the Department of Justice under President Biden. They could have easily just, let's say, indicted Mike Pence for having those documents, and they did not. And the
Yes.
difference is that both Biden and his staff and Vice President Pence and his staff cooperated at all times with the FBI and the National Archives when it came to producing those documents and turning everything over and allowing free access to their residences or offices. So there's a big difference. Again, this is just another example of the Justice Department being not heavy-handed but evenly handed.
And we're going to talk about those cases when they come closer, because now they've been delayed. Also, not only the one in Florida, which is a federal case, but also the one in Washington, which is also a federal case. But in this particular circumstances that Hunter and former President Trump face, both of them now convicted felons. You mentioned something about the Justice Department not being interfering, or the executive powers of the president not interfering in the Justice Department, not weaponizing like they claim. When I say they, of course, I mean the far right MAGA Republicans that think that Joe Biden has not only the superpowers, but it's abusing them of interfering in federal cases or even state cases. Can you lay out the difference quickly about the power that the president has over state cases and federal cases? Because they seem to be confused about that.
Well, the president, even though he's the president and commander-in-chief, has no power whatsoever, no pardon power over state convictions or state investigations. That's something that maybe has not been made clear to the public, but he cannot do anything to interfere at all, even though Donald Trump has said on various occasions that the judge was appointed by Biden, the Department of Justice was involved in this indictment and his trial in New York. So there's no ability at all for the president to pardon anyone in a state matter whatsoever. He does have the ability to not only pardon someone, which makes them free or basically erases the conduct. But what it also indicates is when someone gets a presidential pardon, they're actually admitting to the fact that they committed the crime. So Donald Trump wouldn't have it, either Hunter Biden or Donald Trump wouldn't have it both ways if they were, pardoned in any case that was federal, which President Biden can do in terms of the insurrection case in Washington, D.C., and the classified information documentation case in Florida. He could do that, but if he does pardon, that's essentially an admission of guilt by those individuals. In terms of the state case in Georgia, Mr. Biden cannot pardon any of the defendants in that case, including Donald Trump, because it's a state matter. The difference is significant because federal sentences tend to be much more severe. But in this case, there's going to be another trial for Hunter Biden in terms of in terms of tax evasion in California, I believe in September. The president could erase all those cases and any future federal criminality on the part of his son. He hasn't done that. He could also commute the sentence after a sentence of, let's say, incarceration or even probation. He can commute the sentence, which is basically get it down to ground zero and not have any sort of time, whether it's incarceration or even probation. He could void those sentences altogether, like Donald Trump did with one or two of his other, let's say, sycophants or followers of the MAGA movement.
Indeed, and that's exactly why these cases have been the topic of conversation in so many households, not only in the U.S., but also in the rest of the world. And now they show to be quite the opposite in terms of what people say in the far right about the involvement of the president in both cases. One, if he was to involve, well, now in his home state, Delaware, his son has been convicted of 3 felony charges and could be facing up to 25 years in prison. So we'll see how they develop. And of course, my final question is, what do you think is going to happen in both sentences? They're both now expecting sentencing, and one is facing up to 4 years or even maybe probation. The other one up to 25 years. Sometimes people think that probation could be also the answer for Hunter Biden. What do you think, Counselor?
Well, I'm going to take the easy one first. I think Hunter Biden is going to get probation. I don't believe he's going to be sentenced at all. There's beyond the statute that imposes altogether with those 3 charges 25 years. There's also the guidelines, and those guidelines which are there for a judge to review, take them into consideration. She has to consider those guidelines. In this case, the guidelines allow. There's no mandatory sentence here, but the guidance will essentially allow the judge to in order to sentence someone and not be, let's say, unequal in terms of the treatment, basically anywhere from 0 to 12 months. I don't even think he's going to get that. I think he's going to get probation. The situation with Donald Trump became very much more complicated when he started behaving in a manner which was very disrespectful to the court, to the judicial system in New York, to the jury system, to witnesses like Michael Cohen and Stormy Daniels, impugning their testimony and reputations. That's going to complicate it for the judge. And also the fact that Donald Trump was convicted, or at least was basically declared in contempt of court on 10 different occasions. So he kept on repeating the same type of misstatements. Again, even though the judge had warned the lawyers and Donald Trump to stop it, he finally did stop it. It was a violation of a gag order that was violated at least 10 times, maybe not more. Maybe some of those other violations, the judge or the Department of Justice, the prosecutor's office decided to avoid them. I think with that behavior and the fact that he's probably not going to show any remorse, because remorse, saying I'm sorry, I apologize to my family, to the state of New York, to the judge, to the jury, to the witnesses, that would go a long way for Judge Marchand to impose a probation sentences. But I think now he's going to treat Mr. Trump the way anyone else would be treated if they were a citizen and was a defendant in this case. I think he's going to give him, rather than probation, I think he's going to give him some sentencing time in Rikers Island. But I also believe that he's going to probably suspend the sentence until after the election. Because I think Judge Marchand, who's really a brilliant judge, and also of Colombian background, by the way, Donald Trump attacked that as well because he's a Hispanic judge. Cannon in Florida is also a Hispanic judge of Colombian descent, but he hasn't said anything bad about her, right?
Correct.
She's ruled on behalf of him most of the time. And yet Judge Marchand, who's a Colombian descent, he feels he has to attack him and say, and look at him. To me, Judge Marchand, you can tell what ethnicity he is, right? But, I mean, all those things that Judge Marchand's not going to take it personal. He's not going to like it, but he's not going to take it personal. But I think the other behavior, in attacking other people and the system and not being remorseful, I think that Donald Trump, who's now, he's been convicted of the felonies. And let me just say something else. You're not technically convicted until the sentence is imposed. So they say he's a convicted felon. I'm sorry to say to my friends in the news media that are impartial and very, very accurate, because do they do their investigations very, very deeply and very in a very diligent manner. You're not technically convicted or a convicted felon until you're sentenced. Because let me say, there will be some motions on the part of the defense attorneys in New York. They made them to vacate the verdict and set aside the verdict. The judge denied it. But there are going to be motions in the federal case of Hunter Biden also to set aside the verdict. That's very traditional. They've got to do it. And the judge could set aside the verdict. I don't think they will, because it was pretty clear that there was proof way beyond a reasonable doubt with Hunter Biden, as it was with Donald Trump. So that's not going to be successful. Both men are going to be out, either bond for Mr. Biden, and just on his own recognizance, because he's available. He's not going anywhere in terms of not returning to court. I think that the sentences are going to be different, and the difference is going to be a jail sentence for Donald Trump. And the question is, will he be able to actually follow through and be sentenced and do that sentence and be committed to a jail on Rikers Island? That's yet to be seen. A lot depends on the election results in November.
Indeed. And good clarification, because technically they should be convicted felons when they have a sentence waiting for that sentence to start. So thank you for that. And it's true. We see that in media, mostly left-oriented media. I don't think there's right or left. Unfortunately, we see that nowadays. But at the end of the day, information has to be blind as the law is. And that's why we have an expert here, not only defending the Constitution, but also the rule of law. Thank you so much, Counselor Raymond Colón. I'm going to leave if you allow me to, I'm going to leave your information in the description of this video so people can also reach out when they have any need in terms of law advice.
No, thank you. Absolutely. And it's always nice to see you, Rafael. And thank you so much for letting me be on. Thank you.
My pleasure. And thank you for bringing so much light in this matter that is going to continue to be a topic of discussion. And hopefully you'll be able to jump in again and explain what's going to happen further.
All right. Thank you.